This story is titled, Stepsister Falsely Accused Me of SA, so she and her bro could take my dad's inheritance, but karma hit hard. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, Hey everyone, I'm Ethan. It's my first time posting here. I told my friend what happened to me with my family. He suggested posting it on Reddit to hear your opinions. Alright, let me set the scene. My 33 male dad married Sam and Katie's mom, Linda. She was 39 back then, and I was 12. Linda had been widowed for a few years, and she came into the marriage with 2 kids of her own. Sam, who's 5 years older than me, and Katie, just a year younger than me. It wasn't exactly the Brady Bunch. Sam and Katie didn't hide the fact that they resented me. I guess I was an easy target. My mom had passed away a couple of years before, and I was still grieving when Linda and her kids moved in. Sam was always the alpha, taking every opportunity to boss me around or make me feel like I didn't belong. Katie was quieter, but her jabs were just as sharp. You're not really family, she once said when Dad wasn't around. Stuff like that stung, but I tried to brush it off. Over the years, we kind of settled into this Cold War dynamic. We tolerated each other for Dad's sake, but it was clear we were more rivals than siblings. When Linda passed away a few years ago, she was 54. I thought maybe things would change. I mean, we were all adults now, right? Wrong. If anything, the tension got worse. Fast forward to the present. Dad's getting older, and he's been open about wanting to finalize his will. He's always been upfront about his plans, splitting things fairly between the 3 of us. His logic was simple. We're all his kids now, and he wanted to treat us equally. I thought that was fair. Sam and Katie? Not so much. Sam's always had this entitlement thing going on. He's the oldest, so he acts like he should be Dad's right-hand man. Katie, meanwhile, plays the innocent, supportive daughter when Dad's around. But behind his back, she's just as calculating as Sam. I knew they weren't thrilled about the will, but I didn't realize how far they'd go to tip the scales in their favor. Which brings us to that fateful family dinner. It was supposed to be a nice evening. Just the 4 of us, catching up and enjoying Dad's famous lasagna. We'd barely gotten through the first round of small talk when Katie suddenly pipes up. I've been holding something in for years, she says, her voice shaky. The room goes silent. Dad looks up from his plate, frowning. What do you mean, Katie? She takes a deep breath, her eyes darting between Dad and Sam. I didn't want to bring this up, but I can't stay silent anymore. When we were kids, he hurt me. I blinked, my fork froze in midair. Was she talking about me? Dad's face turned pale. Who hurt you? Katie looked down, her hands trembling as she toyed with her napkin. Him, she whispered, barely glancing in my direction. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My heart started racing. What the hell are you talking about? I asked. Katie flinched like I'd just yelled at her. Sam, ever the protective older brother, jumped in immediately. Don't you dare talk to her like that! He shouted, his eyes blazing. Dad held up a hand to silence me, his expression unreadable. Katie, he said softly, are you saying he did something to you? She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I didn't think I'd ever have to say it out loud. I thought I could just move on. But now that we're talking about the will, I realized I can't let him benefit after he molested me. And just like that, the room tilted on its axis. This is insane, I said, my voice shaking with anger. You're making this up. Katie burst into full-on sobs, and Sam put an arm around her shoulders. You see how defensive he's getting, Dad? That's guilt. That's what guilt looks like. No, this is what being falsely accused looks like. I shot back. This is ridiculous. Katie, you know that never happened. Dad looked torn, his eyes flicking between me and Katie. Sam, he said finally. What do you think? Sam sighed, playing the concerned older brother to perfection. I believe Katie. Why would she lie about something like this? It's not like she gains anything by speaking up. Oh, but she did. They both did. This wasn't about justice or closure. This was about something else. I thought it might be about the will. Katie and Sam had always resented me, and now they had the perfect excuse to cut me out completely. But I wasn't sure what's their motive, and where the hell did the molesting shit came from. Dad, you can't seriously be considering this, I said, desperate to get through to him. I don't know what to think, he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. This is a lot to process. Katie sniffled, wiping her tears with her napkin. I didn't want to ruin dinner. I needed to say it. Sam nodded solemnly. We understand, Katie. You're so brave for speaking up. Brave? Are you kidding me? I looked around the table, feeling like I was in the Twilight Zone. This wasn't just an accusation. It was a calculated move, and I was their target. After Katie's meltdown at dinner, the whole family dynamic went straight into freefall. I'd wake up every morning feeling like I was walking into a courtroom where the jury was still deliberating, and the stakes were my entire future. The worst part? The prosecution was Katie and Sam, tag-teaming their way to Dad's heart and wallet. The next surprise came on a random Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from a long day, hoping to grab some leftovers and crash, when I noticed an envelope on the kitchen counter. It stood out immediately, too formal-looking for the usual bills or junk mail, and my name was written on it in Sam's annoyingly precise handwriting. I should have left it alone. Something about it screamed trouble. I tore it open, expecting another passive-aggressive note or some twisted ultimatum. What I found instead is a formal notice of intent to sue. I scanned the pages, my eyes catching words like emotional distress and intentional harm. It wasn't just vague, it was designed to ruin me without actually saying much. And then I saw the worst, the demand for damages. They wanted money, of course, but this wasn't just about cash. It was about dragging my name through the mud and making me look like a monster. I sat down at the table, the paper shaking in my hands. A million thoughts raced through my mind, most of them variations of, "Are you kidding me?" It was bad enough they'd turned Dad into their personal puppet, but now they were trying to destroy me completely. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was open war. Later that evening, I shoved the letter at Dad, desperate for him to see through their nonsense. "This," I said, pointing to the pages, "is what your precious Katie and Sam are up to now." He picked up the letter, squinting at the legal jargon, his face drawn and tired. When he finally set it down, his response made my stomach drop. "This is a family matter," he said quietly, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. "We shouldn't let it get this far. They're the ones taking it this far, Dad." My voice cracked as I slammed my hand on the table. "And you're just standing there, letting them destroy me." He rubbed his temples, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I'll talk to them." But he wouldn't. He never did. I could already see how it would play out. Katie would cry. Sam would talk circles around him. And Dad would do what he always did. Nothing. I was on my own, and I knew it. The worst part wasn't the lawsuit itself, though that was bad enough. It was knowing that even if I somehow managed to win, I'd still lose in the court of public opinion. At least the opinion of my family. Katie and Sam had already painted me as the villain, and this was just their final brushstroke. But if they thought this would break me, they were wrong. They might have fired the first shot, but they'd just given me a reason to fight back. The next morning, I was in a lawyer's office, a dingy little place downtown that smelled like old paper and desperation. My lawyer, Angela, was sharp, no nonsense, and exactly the kind of person I needed. She flipped through the notice with a calm expression, her pen tapping against the edge of her desk. "Well, this is creative," she said, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "They've thrown everything but the kitchen sink into this claim. Emotional distress, reputational damage. Honestly, it's almost impressive how vague they've managed to keep it." I slumped in my chair, my frustration bubbling over. "Impressive? They're accusing me of things I didn't do, Angela. They've already turned my dad against me. Now they're trying to ruin me completely." Angela set the papers down and leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. "Let me be clear about something. They're banking on intimidation. This is a scare tactic, plain and simple. They're hoping you'll panic, settle, or back off entirely. But their case? It's weak. Paper thin, actually." Her confidence was a small but much-needed lifeline. "So, what do we do?" She gave a small shrug. "First, we respond formally. I'll file a motion to dismiss the frivolous parts, which is basically everything. Then we'll gather evidence, poke holes in their story, and let the court see what this really is. A pathetic attempt to bully you into submission." I wanted to believe her, but doubt still gnawed at me. What about the rest of the family? They're already against me. If this goes public, Angela raised a hand, cutting me off. "Let me worry about the legal side of things. Your job is to stay out of trouble and not give them any ammo. The court deals with facts, not family gossip. And trust me, the facts are on your side." Her words were strong, jolting me back to reality. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a fighting chance. Angela was a professional, and while Katie and Sam might have mastered the art of manipulation, they didn't have the law on their side. As I left her office that day, a new thought took root. Maybe, just maybe, I could come out of this mess not just intact, but stronger. Katie and Sam might have started this fight, but they'd just made a critical mistake. They underestimated me. I may not know what lies ahead, but I'm feeling optimistic about the lawsuit. I'll keep you guys updated. Update 1 point. Hey guys, it's Ethan. Guess what? The fight turned real when the lawsuit moved forward. Angela worked fast, filing a motion to dismiss the more ridiculous claims in the suit. They've got nothing to stand on, she said, her tone crisp. But we need to be strategic. They're using this as a platform to keep their story alive, and that's where they're dangerous. The depositions were brutal. Katie cried through hers, giving vague statements about how my actions had ruined her ability to trust and caused her unimaginable stress. Angela was unshaken. She leaned forward, her tone cutting but calm. Can you provide specific instances of these alleged actions? Katie stammered, her narrative falling apart under scrutiny. She managed to string together a few exaggerated stories, but nothing held up when Angela pressed her for dates or evidence. Sam, of course, tried to play it cool. He spoke in measured tones, giving long-winded explanations that boiled down to nothing concrete. At one point, he said, "This isn't about facts. It's about the impact of his behavior." Angela raised an eyebrow, her voice sharp. "Impact requires evidence. What specific behavior are you referring to?" Sam faltered, and the cracks in their story became impossible to ignore. Equarked. Still, even with the lawsuit thing, Katie's accusations started to spread. Sam and Katie didn't just rely on Dad's doubt to do the damage. They worked overtime to make sure everyone in the family heard their version of events. It wasn't direct or confrontational. They were too smart for that. They used insinuation, whispers, and well-timed emotional breakdowns to weave their narrative into every corner of my life. At first, I thought the fallout would stay within our immediate family. But then, at a family friend's wedding, I started noticing the looks. You know the kind. The kind people give when they've heard something they shouldn't have, but can't quite reconcile it with what they know about you. It started small. Aunt Karen, who'd always been a little nosy but warm, suddenly seemed colder. She avoided making eye contact, and when I tried to engage her in conversation, she gave curt, dismissive answers. I didn't think much of it until I overheard her talking to Katie near the dessert table. "I just can't believe he'd still show up to things like this," Karen whispered, glancing in my direction. Katie sighed deeply, playing the victim role perfectly. "It's just something I have to deal with," she said softly, her voice carrying just enough pain to pull sympathy. I try to stay strong for Dad, but it's hard being around him. Sam, of course, was no less subtle. His weapon wasn't fake tears. It was carefully curated conversations that always left people questioning me. At work, things weren't much better. Word travels fast in families, and it's amazing how little it takes for whispers to seep into other parts of your life. A co-worker I'd been friendly with for years suddenly started canceling our lunch plans, and I caught another one glancing at me warily during a meeting. It wasn't just the looks, though. My world started to shrink. Invitations to family dinners stopped coming. Friends who'd been constant suddenly seemed busy every time I reached out. Even strangers seemed to sense the tension, like it was radiating off me. The worst part? I couldn't do anything about it. How do you defend yourself against something as vague and insidious as an accusation that's never fully stated? Sam and Katie had orchestrated this perfectly, staying just on the edge of outright defamation, but doing enough damage to make me question my place in the world. One afternoon, I ran into an old friend from high school at a coffee shop. Mike had always been straightforward. No nonsense, no beating around the bush. He greeted me with a warm smile, but as we talked, his tone shifted. "So," he said carefully, "everything okay with your family?" I paused, my coffee halfway to my mouth. "Why do you ask?" He scratched the back of his head. "Just, I heard something. From your cousin's sister-in-law, I think? I don't know, man. It sounded heavy. Even here, in this random interaction, the shadow of Sam and Katie's whispers was following me. "What did you hear?" I asked, my voice low. Mike hesitated, then shrugged. "Something about you and Katie not getting along? Look, I don't want to spread gossip. I figured if it was important, you'd tell me." "It's not true," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Whatever you've heard, it's not true." Mike nodded, but I could tell he wasn't entirely convinced. And that killed me. I was losing ground, and fast. Sam's influence wasn't just about turning Dad against me anymore. It was about isolating me completely. Every interaction felt like a test. Every glance like a judgment. And the worst part was, I knew Sam and Katie were just getting started. They weren't satisfied with planting doubt in Dad's mind. They wanted everyone, family, friends, co-workers, to see me as the villain in their story. And if I didn't find a way to fight back, they'd succeed. I realized that if I stayed passive, Their version of the story would be the only one people ever heard. And I wasn't about to let them take everything from me without a fight. After months of back and forth, the judge finally dismissed most of their claims as unsubstantiated and without merit. Katie and Sam's case was reduced to a single minor claim, which Angela settled out of court for a symbolic dollar amount. "It's a win," she said with a triumphant grin. "They didn't want a trial because they knew they'd lose everything. So this is where I am right now. I actually still feel miserable and do not think they will let me on my own. If anything happens, I'll post an update here. Update 2: Hey, it's Ethan. Hear what happened." So Sam's manipulations did not stop. He started taking active moves to take control of Dad's legacy. It became clear during a family dinner, one of the few times everyone was under the same roof. As usual, Katie sat at the edge of the table, silent but visibly distressed. Dad looked distracted, and Sam took full advantage. As plates were being cleared, Sam leaned back in his chair, his voice calm but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Dad's been going through some estate planning," he said, glancing at Katie. "It's been hard, but we're making progress." The room went quiet. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, looking anywhere but at me. "It's nothing major," he said quickly. "Just making sure things are in order." Sam gave a patronizing nod. "Right. Nothing major. Just a few adjustments to make sure everyone is protected." "Protected from what?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. Sam turned to me with an expression of mock concern. "It's not about you," he said smoothly. "It's about Katie. She's been through enough, don't you think?" The unspoken accusation hung in the air. My fists clenched under the table, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Katie doesn't need protection from me," I said, looking directly at Dad. "And you know that." Dad opened his mouth to respond, but Sam cut him off. "This isn't about pointing fingers," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "It's about fairness, making sure everyone gets what they need." Fairness? Or control? I was losing it? Sam's expression hardened for a split second before he turned back to Dad. "See what I mean? This kind of tension isn't good for anyone. That's why it's so important to handle this now." After that dinner, I couldn't sit idly by anymore. I started paying closer attention to Sam's moves, and the pattern became clear. He wasn't just advising Dad, he was inserting himself into every decision. He scheduled meetings with Dad's attorney under the guise of helping out. He brought over spreadsheets and folders, presenting them as tools for simplifying the estate, but clearly designed to benefit himself and Katie. One day, I stopped by Dad's house unannounced. Sam was there, as usual, sitting at the dining table with a laptop and a stack of papers. Dad sat across from him, looking exhausted. "What's going on here?" I asked, stepping into the room. Sam didn't even look up. "Just helping Dad organize a few things," he said casually. "You know, estate stuff." Dad gave me a strained smile. "Sam's been a big help lately. I'm not as sharp with all this paperwork as I used to be." I walked over, glancing at the documents on the table. "Have you run any of this by your attorney?" Dad hesitated, and Sam jumped in. "We're just brainstorming right now," he said smoothly. "No need to involve lawyers yet." "That's exactly when you should involve a lawyer," I said, my voice firm. "Dad, you don't need Sam to manage this for you. If you want help, hire a professional." Sam laughed lightly, finally looking up at me. "Always so suspicious." "I'm just looking out for Dad. You should try it sometime." "Looking out for him or yourself?" I shot back. Dad raised a hand, his tone weary. "That's enough. Both of you." The tension at home was one thing, but it wasn't contained. Sam was expanding his influence, using the accusation to turn the family against me and strengthen his position as Dad's trusted advisor. The worst moment came when Dad called me over one evening. I thought it was just to catch up, but as soon as I walked into his study, I saw the familiar stack of papers on his desk. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice hesitant, "about how to make sure everything's fair." "Fair," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "What does that mean?" Dad rubbed his temples. "Katie's been struggling. Sam thinks it might be better to shift things around a bit, to make sure she's taken care of." I stared at him, my chest tightening. "Dad, you've always said you wanted things to be equal. Why change that now?" He avoided my gaze. "It's not about equality, son. It's about need." "Need?" I said, my voice rising. "Or manipulation, because that's what this is. Sam and Katie are using you." Dad's face darkened. "That's enough." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I'm not trying to attack you, Dad. I just want you to see what's happening." He shook his head, his tone final. "I've made my decision." That night, I realized I couldn't rely on Dad to see through Sam's schemes on his own. Sam was too good at playing the dutiful son while subtly painting me as the antagonist. If I was going to stop him, I needed to find proof, something concrete to expose his true motives. I wasn't going to let him take everything without a fight. The turning point came when I found undeniable inconsistencies in Katie's timeline. It started with an old family calendar I stumbled upon in Dad's attic. Each summer, our activities were meticulously logged. Trips, camps, weekends at the lake house. Katie's claim had centered on a specific summer at the lake house, but the calendar made it clear. I hadn't been there. That was the summer I'd spent recovering from an appendix surgery, stuck at home with Aunt Louise. This was the proof I needed. For weeks, I'd been on the defensive, but now I had something concrete to push back with. The next family gathering was tense, as usual. Dad sat at the head of the table, looking older than ever, while Sam held court, steering every conversation back to Katie's supposed strength and resilience. Katie sat quietly, her usual teary-eyed performance in full effect. I let them have their moment. Then, as the plates were being cleared, I stood up. "There's something we need to address," I said, my voice steady, but loud enough to command the room's attention. All eyes turned to me. Sam leaned back in his chair, a smug smile on his face. "This isn't the time, little brother," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "It's exactly the time," I shot back. "I've spent weeks listening to you spread lies about me, and I'm done staying silent." Dad frowned. "What are you talking about?" I turned to Katie. "You claimed that something happened between us during that summer at the lake house. But here's the thing. You know as well as I do that I wasn't even there." Her face went pale, and for a moment, I saw panic flicker in her eyes. "That's ridiculous," Sam interjected. "You don't get to twist this around." I pulled out the family calendar, placing it on the table for everyone to see. "This is from that summer," I said. "Every trip, every event, all logged by Dad. And guess what? I spent that summer recovering from surgery, with Aunt Louise, nowhere near the lake house." There was a beat of silence, heavy and oppressive. Dad leaned forward, his brow furrowed as he examined the calendar. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. Katie stammered, I don't remember every detail. Trauma can mess with your memory." "Convenient," I interrupted, "because your memory just happens to crumble the second there's evidence against it." Sam stood, trying to regain control of the situation. "Look, Dad, this isn't about exact dates. It's about the fact that Katie has been deeply hurt and needs support. Why can't he just own up to that?" "Because there's nothing to own up to," I said firmly. "This has never been about Katie's well-being. It's been about you and her manipulating Dad to get what you want." Sam's face darkened, his usual smugness replaced by something colder. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Trying to turn this around like we're the bad guys." "You are the bad guys," I said, my voice rising. "You've been playing on Dad's emotions, twisting the truth, and using lies to push me out of the family. But it stops here." For the first time, the family didn't immediately jump to Katie's defense. Instead, they looked to Dad, who was staring at the calendar in silence. Finally, he looked up, his expression a mix of confusion and anger. "Katie, why didn't you mention this before? If the timeline doesn't match, how am I supposed to believe the rest of your story?" Katie's tears came then, but they felt more desperate than genuine. "Dad, I didn't mean to. I don't know what to say." Sam stepped in, his voice low and controlled. "She doesn't have to explain herself to him. We're trying to protect her, not put her on trial again." "No one's on trial," Dad said, his tone sharper than I'd heard in months. "But if what he's saying is true, then I need to reevaluate everything. I can't just ignore this." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Katie retreated into silence, and Sam, for all his composure, seemed rattled. I could feel the shift in the air, subtle but significant. For the first time, the family wasn't blindly accepting their version of events. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. Sam and Katie's hold on Dad was weakening, and now I had something I hadn't had in weeks. Hope. As I left that night, Dad stopped me at the door. "I need time to think," he said. "But I'm glad you spoke up." It wasn't forgiveness or resolution, but it was something. And that was enough for now. This is where I am at right now. I am not satisfied with this confrontation yet. I'll think about the next move and keep you updated. Stay tuned. Final update? Hola, Zrinya. It's Ethan again. So, after confronting Sam and Katie, things in the family didn't magically fix themselves. But the cracks in their story were now visible, and I wasn't about to let them patch them up with more lies. I kept my distance for a while, letting the weight of the truth settle in. Sometimes, the best way to fight back isn't with another move. It's by giving people enough rope to hang themselves. The unraveling began sooner than I expected. Katie, who had always relied on the fragility of her victim persona, started slipping. The more people questioned her story, the more inconsistencies came to light. At a family gathering a few weeks later, she made the mistake of elaborating. It wasn't just the lake house, she told Aunt Louise in a hushed tone that wasn't as hushed as she thought. There were other times, too. I just haven't had the strength to talk about them. I caught Louise frowning from across the room. She glanced at me briefly before turning back to Katie. But you told me it happened at the lake house. That was the one place you were certain about, Katie stammered, trying to backtrack. It's hard to keep it all straight. It was a long time ago. My cousin's frown deepened, and she didn't press further, but the damage was done. I knew Louise well enough to know she'd be connecting the dots, and seeing how little sense Katie's claims made. Sam, meanwhile, was too arrogant to realize his control was slipping. He continued to act like the family's savior, pushing harder for changes to Dad's will. But his overreach was starting to work against him. I learned from Dad's attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Taylor, that Sam had been calling her incessantly. He's relentless, she told me over the phone. Keep asking about options to adjust the distribution. Did he ask you to exclude me entirely? I asked, already knowing the answer. There was a pause. Let's just say he's been persuasive about reallocating assets to better support Katie. Of course he has, I muttered. Thanks for letting me know. Ms. Taylor's tone sharpened. For what it's worth, I've worked with your father for years. He's a fair man. I think he's starting to see through their intentions. It was a small reassurance, but enough to push me forward. The real turning point came when Katie and Sam's greed finally outpaced their planning. Sam, emboldened by what he thought was his dominance, pushed Dad to sign a new version of the will. What he didn't realize was that Dad had grown suspicious since the calendar incident. Instead of signing blindly, Dad asked to meet with Ms. Taylor first. At that meeting, Sam showed his hand. He brought Katie along, both of them insisting that the changes were urgent. Katie cried, of course, and Sam spun his usual tale about protecting the family. But Ms. Taylor, sharp as ever, asked one simple question. Why the urgency? Has there been a change in circumstances? Sam faltered, caught off guard. Well, Katie's been struggling, and we want to make sure she's taken care of before things get complicated. Complicated how? Ms. Taylor pressed. Katie started crying harder, but it wasn't enough to distract from the fact that Sam didn't have a real answer. Dad, sitting silently through the exchange, finally spoke. I don't think we need to make any changes right now, he said, his tone calm but firm. I'd like to take some time to review everything. Sam's face hardened, but he couldn't argue without looking suspicious. Katie shot him a panicked look, but he just nodded tightly. They left the meeting empty-handed. When Dad told me about the meeting later, I could see the shift in his demeanor. He wasn't fully on my side yet, but he was starting to question everything. I don't like feeling rushed, he admitted. And Ms. Taylor's right. There's no reason to make hasty decisions. Good, I said, because hasty decisions are exactly what they want. In the weeks that followed, Sam and Katie's desperation became more apparent. They started pushing harder, but their tactics were unraveling. Family members who had once avoided me were now asking questions. Aunt Louise and uncles, even some of the cousins. One by one, they began to see through the facade. The final blow came during another family dinner, one that Sam had insisted on hosting. He'd planned it as a way to bring everyone together, but it quickly turned into his undoing. Midway through the evening, Aunt Louise stood up, clearing her throat. Katie, I have a question, she said, her tone unusually stern. Katie froze. What is it? Louise folded her arms. You've said a lot about what happened, but the more you talk, the less sense it makes. You say it was the lake house, but you've also said it wasn't. And now you're saying there were other times? Which is it? Katie's face went pale. I don't remember everything exactly. Convenient, Louise said. Because I've talked to others, and none of it adds up. Sam jumped in. That's enough. This isn't an interrogation. No, it's not, Louise shot back. But if you're going to accuse someone of something so serious, you'd better have the truth to back it up. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to Katie. For the first time, she didn't cry. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, looking like a deer caught in headlights. After that night, Sam and Katie's grip on the family crumbled entirely. Dad, finally recognizing the harm they had caused, took decisive action. Without a word to them, he discreetly removed both Sam and Katie from the will, undoing the manipulative changes Sam had snuck in. He didn't need to confront them. His silent resolve made his stance crystal clear. As for me, I didn't lift a finger. I didn't need to. Their desperation, lies, and greed did all the work for me. They isolated themselves, leaving behind nothing but the chaos they created. Karma handled the rest. In the end, I walked away with my integrity intact, and my family finally beginning to rebuild trust in me. The inheritance? That was irrelevant. What mattered was that the truth was out, and Sam and Katie had no one to blame but themselves.